individuals who are well accomplished. And so tonight our goal is Author Talk, and it's to bring their works together and to decide exactly, and for you all to decide where you see the message of these works in your personal lives. And so we're hoping through tonight's conversation that we will gain clarity, that we'll gain understanding, but furthermore, that we will gain a charge to go out and to actually do and be inspired by the work that these two authors have done. We have Dr. Mary Whitley Moss, who is the author of Preach Moss, When She Heard the Call. This particular work not only deals with her personal journey as a woman in ministry, but just in general as a person who had to navigate their calling, their assignment. She literally walks us from the time, and even before she heard the call, to the time when she heard the call, and now where she is as a result of the call. And so we are excited tonight to hear more from her. We're excited tonight to just understand a little bit more about her work.
came up with the title Chocolate Covered Nut because I would like to, not only through this discussion that we're having tonight, but through others reading the manuscript Chocolate Covered Nut, I'd like to attack the stigma associated with mental illness. Chocolate Covered Nut, if you think about the title, it stems from two issues that I have overcome my own struggle with in my life. Being African American, specifically being a dark-skinned African American, and also struggling with mental illness, the nut portion of Chocolate Covered Nut. So I overcame my own issues with being a dark-skinned individual and also suffering with mental illness. So I wanted to invite others to read about how I eventually accepted both of those issues and embraced those issues.
Preach, Moss. When we deal directly with when she heard the call, I don't want to jump too far ahead of where we're going tonight. So I'm going to dial back just a moment and ask you particularly about the journey to purpose, because I do believe that in both works, we kind of see where they marry, right? And definitely we kind of pulled out of both the journey to purpose, that both of you all were on a journey. And everybody in this room and everybody who's watching is on a journey. And so here's my first question for you. What is one key lesson that you would share about your journey to purpose? We'll start with Dr. Moss.
Thank you, Pastor Anderson. A powerful question, journey to purpose. First of all, I believe strongly that God is the giver of purpose when he created life. And so purpose was instilled in me while I was still in my mother's womb. And one of the things that I began to look at, it was the fact that it is so crucial to live and walk in purpose for which you and I were born for. And so when we look at my call, the book, Preach Moss, it is all interconnected, intertwined to what God was doing. And God knows the purpose, the plan that he had for me. And so when I had the call to preach, that was God working out his purpose in, with, and through me. And so I am a walking example, a model of what God has already done in my life.
On my journey to purpose, it was a unique journey because I was also learning about faith at the same time. And with Chocolate Covered Nut, and we'll discuss this later, but I, not only was I learning about faith, at the same time I was learning about my destiny. The two intertwined and intersected. And after I learned more about faith, I learned more about my purpose at the same time. So God had me on a journey, and when I did, when my purpose was revealed to me, I also had an increase in faith. And faith is trusting God. So as I was also learning more about trusting in God, I was also learning more about how he wanted me to embrace my purpose and do more for him in the vein of what I was doing on my job, what I was doing in ministry. So that's how I learned more about my purpose.
Adding along to that, you said your journey for a purpose included a lot of faith. Sometimes when we are on that road, all types of negative things come against us. So just give me one negative thing that came against you when you were on your journey to purpose?
One negative thing that came along on my journey to purpose was a struggle in finances. But that struggle in finances taught me endurance. When I, when and it also taught me to rely more on the Lord. When it came to a point where I saw that in my own strength, I couldn't face my financial difficulties. That's when I saw that I needed to rely on my Lord. And he's the one that brought me through.
I want to kind of just ask this because we were talking about that journey, that road to purpose. And even in that, many people will try to figure out oftentimes how to surmise their journey, right? When somebody asks you for your cliff notes of sorts, the short version, right, of that journey. What is, if you had to define the road you've had to travel, how would you define that road in one word? What would that be?
Winding.
She said winding, defining that journey in the road travel in one word, it would be winding. All right? What about you, Dr. Jackson?
Revealing.
All right. Revealing. So we've got a winding road, and we've got a road of revelation, revealing, right? Things that we're embarking upon, opening up our eyes, right?
Because aren't we discussing tonight the journey of discovery?
Yeah. Absolutely. And in that journey, of course, we understand, right, that there are things that we learn about ourselves as we go, right? And I think that's the part, right, as we go. We kind of always talk about that there is this notion that we're supposed to be completed or that something needs to be complete before we understand. But many of us in this room can attest to the fact that we learn as we went. And it's
I agree with that. Revelation often comes when, we're in times of need. God reveals things to us that we didn't even know was there. So that's some good words, winding and revelation. So let's move on to the journey of faith, which you already kind of touched on. But how important has your faith been? The both of you, how important has your faith been during the journey?
I couldn't have made it without my faith. I couldn't have made it. They say without faith, without faith you cannot please God. And on this journey, I needed faith to make it each and every day. I wouldn't have made it without the faith that God taught me to be able to. Um, I'm trying to use big words, but I don't need to use big words. Let me let me just put it this way. If the Lord hadn't taught me about this faith walk and let me go on this faith walk, I wouldn't have made it this far. I went through so many struggles in my marriage, in being a pharmacist, in making it through the financial struggles. Without that faith to faith walk, I wouldn't have made it. Even with our praise team, this is my praise team member, and we've had struggles with the praise team. But without faith, I would not have made it. I had to believe that the Lord was going to get me from each step to the next step, and even from on a daily basis. I had to go in that pharmacy and I had to go into prayer to make it through each and every day. There were struggles on the job on a daily basis. And without believing that the Lord was going to get me through that day, I wouldn't have made it. And it took faith. I had to believe that the Lord was going to get me through. And without faith, I wouldn't have made it through each and every day.
I agree with my niece with the faith piece. I think that a lot of time people have a definition of faith, but they do not know how to live out faith. And faith truly is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I like to grab that definition as I walk through my journey uh, as a preacher called by God. God does not give you all of the steps. He does not, did not, when I received my calling and walked through the woods in Watson, Louisiana, and was struggling with what was happening to me and with me, I did not have even anyone to walk and explain certain things where you're acting like this or doing that because God is doing something in your life. But with faith, you have to truly believe in God. I love the definition. You have to trust him when you cannot trace him. And there were many times along my journey that I couldn't trace him. I didn't, when we reached the struggles, and to be perfectly honest with you, I couldn't trace God. I didn't see God's hand. It sounds holy and sounds profound, and you sound devout and all that, saying that I saw him do this and I went on. That's not faith. Faith is walking when you don't see him. Faith is going forward when you don't even see the door that says forward. So for me on my journey, I could not have made it because of being a woman in ministry had I not believed in the one who called me. And this is the reason why I tell folk all the time, women in particularly, which is my focus, that you have to make sure that God called you. You have to have that confidence, because if you lack confidence, then how are you going to be able to walk the walk of faith?
I have my group leader here from the Prevent T2 program, and many don't know this, but I took a journey last year of weight loss, and there was a time when I couldn't see the weight loss at first, but I had to believe that I was losing the weight. I couldn't see myself losing the weight. But for a long time, the weight was coming off. But I had to believe that if I kept doing what Sister Myra said that it would take to lose the weight and keep it off, I had to trust in the Lord that if I kept doing it, then whatever I saw in that I was going to look like him, that I would achieve in this program. And eventually, and Sister Myra knows this, goals that I set for the group, eventually it came. But people didn't know that at first I was 192 pounds. Now I'm at the end, and we're going to be having a graduation. But I had to believe and trust that I would get to this end.
So, Dr. Moss, you actually shifted us over into this segment of calling, right? And talking about calling. And I just want to kind of qualify this and say that everybody in the room has a calling. Some of us have yet to figure that out, and some of us know what it is. But both of you all have had experiences where you heard the voice of God. Whether it was in the muscadine vines when you were out there, or whether it was in the dream with the man at the pool, right? Wherever we were, we had a moment of calling. Here's my question. Everybody's calling isn't the same, so we dare not tread into that territory, right? But here's what I do want to ask. What's a vital piece for somebody in the room or watching who is saying, I have not accepted this calling? What's a vital piece of accepting the calling of God on their life, whether it's to preach, whether it is mental health, whether it is to sing, whatever it may be, to work with children, what is a vital piece for you all particularly of accepting the call on your life?
I'm glad you asked. I was just referencing back to my book, and I did a chapter on claiming my call. And I said in the book, unapologetically and without reservation, I claimed my call. And one of the things that I think it really is important, though, that we understand what a call is, and the fact that you have been calling. So calling for me is defined as that urging, that sense of urging from God, calling you to do a particular assignment or work for Him. It is a calling, something. It will not leave you alone, and it is from God. Heard the voice of God, and it was clear to me that it was the voice of God. And the great thing about it, I was in the game, call it my retreat now, in the woods of Watson, Louisiana. And that gave me an opportunity to clearly have meaningful conversations with God and to even ask critical questions. So once I accepted, and also in this book, when God's yes is louder than my no. And I went through that because God would not leave me alone. I gave God some excuses. But God said, my yes is louder than your no. So once I accepted that call, that was something that I recognized. And I think this is very key. And it's in the book. And I'm not going to give you all the information because the book is back there on the table. And I want to make sure you get your copy. But when you accept your call, you cannot hide that call. Some folk want to have a hidden call because of what, as Terry has said, the struggles and the things that you have to deal with, the adversities and all of that. A lot of people walk around with a calling but refuses to acknowledge that call because of man or what people are saying or what would my family say. But when you truly receive and hear the voice of God, then your answer and your response, and this is what I had to live through. My response was not to man. My response was to the one who called me. And to refuse to answer God, and I tell my preachers this all the time, to refuse to answer God because of humanity, then you have offended the one who thought enough of you to call you to do a work for him. And so I dare not offend God because of what lie before me. But I'm going to say this real quickly because I know this time can pass so quickly. Every time we do this stuff, we run out of time. But you have to embrace the call. I accepted the call, and I kind of marinated in the call for a minute. But then came the point in the call that I actually had to claim my call, which meant then that I had come out before the people. Couldn't hide it. Couldn't stay in the closet. You had to come out and acknowledge before man that God has called me. And so that took another step. It was more than just saying, yes, Lord. But it meant moving up, getting up to embrace the assignment that God has called you to. And whenever you accept that assignment, that brings some other things. For me, to accept the call to preach meant that I had to go before my pastor, who was a hard taskmaster. But when I went to my pastor, he's gone to be with the Lord now, Charles Smith, and I sat and simply said to him, Pastor, I've been called, and I did not say I've been called, I said specifically what I was called to do. I was called to preach. So many people miss that because what's really happening is, God, I'm going to negotiate this thing 50-50. I'm going to acknowledge that you called me. But many people say, I'm not sure what you called me for. Then you need to go back to God. Because man cannot give you an assignment. Man didn't give you the call. And so whenever I embraced my call, it meant another journey to my pastor's office. And then when I got there, he simply said, I've been waiting on you. God has a way of confirming his own call.
It's good, Pastor Moss. Very good.
Now, not every call has to be to the ministry. My call was an assignment. My assignment was to be a pharmacist. And I actually tried to run away from my call. And you'll see that in Chocolate Covered Nut. I tried to run. But like Auntie said, eventually you have to embrace that call. You have to embrace it. I tried to go back to medical school. My husband let me move to Arizona and be a medical student once again. But eventually, I had to embrace my call. So I'm a pharmacist again. And to be honest with you, when you embrace your call and you walk in what the Lord wants you to do, he allows you to do it his way. He gives you what you need to walk in that calling. And when I operate as a pharmacist these days, I walk in it in excellence, and I enjoy it. And he gives me everything I need to do it to the best of my ability. And to be honest with you, now that I have embraced my calling as a pharmacist, it's not so hard anymore. It's not so hard to be a pharmacist. And people wonder, I know you guys most of you have filled medication, books in a pharmacy these days. But since this is my calling, the Lord gives me the strength to do my assignment, even though at first, when I was a pharmacist, it was difficult.
Can I say something, Terry? Can I tag on that real quick? Is it okay, Pastor? Because let us be clear that your calling and our assignments, again, is with purpose, but it's not wrapped up in us. Whenever God calls one, he has a job for you to do for him. We need to hear that. Now, every now and then, I know I'm supposed to be sitting here calm, cool, and legs crossed and in a little mild talk show. But every now and then, something stir up in me, because when we do not show up for the assignment, somebody is hurting or left out because you didn't show up. You understand? And if we think that the calling, and God forbid, that the calling is about us, a calling for God ought to make you meek and humble, not a superstar. But God, your purpose, Terry's purpose, my purpose, those gathered in this room, your purpose is wrapped up, interconnected to a bigger purpose. Your purpose is never separated from the bigger purpose of God. And God's purpose is about saving humanity. That's the only reason we call. That don't sound glamorous, but you don't know if you saved because you were wrapped up in purpose.
And as Pastor Moss and Terry was saying, God will give you everything that you need to fulfill that purpose. He's not just going to tell you to go out and do something, and he doesn't equip you with the right gear or, the right frame of mind to do what you need to do. So just remember that. Sometimes we do get scared because something God calls us to do is way out our league. But guess what? If he's calling you to do it, it's not about you. It's about what he wants you to do. As Pastor Moss said, that, it's about reaching at least one, to do what we need to do. Switching gears a little bit, I just want to know about the book writing process. Both of you, just give us a little snippet of what is it actually like writing a book, not just a Christian book, but a book to help others.
I actually started writing my first book, The Madness Within, while I was still in pharmacy school. And I used my journals. I've been writing a journal since I was a little girl. It was I called it a diary back then. But when I wrote my first book, I actually used snippets of all those diaries that I collected throughout my life, and I used them to write The Madness Within. And in pharmacy school, I decided that I wanted to share everything that I've experienced throughout my life and let others know how to overcome mental illness and what I went through to overcome mental illness. So I would just use my free time and get on the computer and just type in my free time. And I decided to take all of that once I got a initial manuscript, and I tried to get a publisher first. And I copyrighted the book. After I copyrighted the book, then I went to I self-published the book. And once I self-published, then I decided to start marketing the book. And then 10 years later, I decided to write a sequel. And eventually, I would like to have one of the books made into a screenplay.
Well, my journey to writing was a little bit different. I was torn between, no, not really torn. My colleagues and people were saying to me, because I've done so much of religious education, training, seminary, and the above. I hold a doctor of ministry degree from Beeson Divinity School, and so I was pulled to write academically. In fact, I'm still pulled to write. Got some messages just last week because I said I don't want to write academically. I don't want to do it. And so they were, let's just do some articles on something. So I still haven't done that, but my journey to writing Preach Moss came, the process started with me just remembering my journey from Watson. I didn't have the diary, but I had it in my head and my heart, my life in Watson, Louisiana. And I was able to track the steps of a little girl with the little pigtails in Watson, Louisiana. So I captured all of that. And then the first thing that I did when I decided, I said I wanted to write something simple, something that could be a one-time reading, something that was personal, something that can help somebody, and they did not have to get a dictionary to read it, but a book that also can tell the story of Mary Whitley Moss, could paint the picture. So I contacted my good friend and my editor. I actually have an editor, Elder Maxwell. My editor is out of Atlanta, Georgia. And this is what he do, young man. And I say, tell me, because that's how I am. That which I don't know, I ask. Tell me how to write a book. And where do I start? I say, I got a lot in me. And he say, start writing. Just start writing. And let it pour out and begin to outline what you want to say. Know what thread that you are trying to run to the end of that book. And so when I laid that out and began to, he said, just start writing. Don't worry about anything. And so I did an outline. I sent it to him. It made sense. We talked through it. He questioned pieces. He tore it apart. And after that, he said, now, you ready to write? I had an outline. My chapters were already built in before I wrote the words of each chapter. And I did not leave my editor. Whenever I finished a chapter, I would send that chapter to Atlanta, and he would edit it, because I already knew. Let me back up a second. Because of my dissertation in seminary, I already knew the basic principles of writing. Let me not forget to tell you that. In seminary, we had writing classes, because one of the things that you have to remember when you're writing is that once you write and put this book out here, the people cannot come and ask you what you mean by this or what you mean by that. So you had to learn how to write in the academe. So I had that behind me, basic writing skills, trying to make sure I needed to know who my audience was, who you writing to, and what you trying to say. Who is this book really for? And I had to make that decision as I began to write this book. And so this book, though it can be read by many people, it was written for women in ministry. But yet it was principled enough that anyone could glean some different truths from it. But it was really written to women in ministry, because I realized women in ministry are still struggling. They need encouragement. They needed to hear another sister's story. And as I said in the book, my story could never in totality be your story. But my story, you can read it, and therein you may find a part of you. And so that's how, Nesta, that I started to write.
Two different paths, but y'all both came up with the same solution, which is great books.
I do want to ask, when we deal with, and we got a couple of more minutes of this, and then we'll open up for audience questions also. So audience, please be preparing your questions that you may have for any of the authors. Twofold question, but I'm going to ask one, and then I'll ask one after, and this ask another question. Sometimes as you are writing in your journey, because the journey is not over, right? And there is, we're working our way through some things as we write. Just like often when we write sermons, we're not, sometimes you preach to yourself as you're working through some things. So as you all are writing these books, particularly because there's a specific emphasis that now you become the expert on, right? When people read your book, they are deeming you as the expert of the topic that you penned. And so how do you balance being the expert while working those topics that you are very much so still working through, even though you are the expert? I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? All right.
Yeah, it makes plenty of sense. So I'm going to go first, Niece. Is that okay? And I'm so glad you say working, because my story ended. Struggles that I still I try to be very authentic, that my voice is authentic, and that I am human. I don't try to, I do not project. If in my book, I even at the end of this book, I simply say that the journey still goes on. I'm still trying to get there. I'm still literally trying to preach a good sermon because I have not arrived. And so I just try to be Mary Louise. I try to be human. I don't come off as if I am the expert because I'm not. But I can tell you my story. And that keeps me on safe grounds. And that keeps people, well, it keeps me from falling victim to other people's expectations.
What did we discuss the other night? Refer. Even on the job, I always make sure that if something comes up that I can't answer, I make sure that I let somebody know, no, I cannot answer that. And I refer them to the expert.
All right. Go ahead, Anissa. Okay.
See, we got to understand this is God thing. And every day we wake up. That's why every day I'm excited about my journey. I don't know what's tomorrow again because I hold his hand. It's going to be all right. But I anticipate God is going to do something with me every day. It may be at Albertsons. It may be in a workshop I'm doing. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I spring up every morning. And I still enjoy stuff. I still I never lose my excitement. My brother is in the audience. I get that from I never stop anticipating, and I had the opportunity to return back to my alma mater, Beeson Divinity School, to preach in the chapel there. And I was a little kid. I was giggly, and I want to stay a little kid. And I want to be happy. I don't want to be down and out and head down. I want to laugh a lot. And so there's an excitement on my journey. I'm excited. Once I preach, when I finish preaching today, once I that, I'm getting excited because, as Dr. E. Paul in some of our sessions, the minute you preach one sermon, God already has the other one in your belly. So I'm excited to see God, what you got. Makes it clear to me. What do you want your people to hear? So I get excited when God starts breathing on me.
This is Mental Health Month. So one question I want to ask Terry is, what is one of the most common myths that you have heard or that you know about in the African American community?
One of the most common myths is that mental illness does not exist in it. That's one of the most common myths. Before I was diagnosed with mental illness, rarely did, to be honest with you, I really wasn't introduced to it. I didn't know anybody in my family that had a problem with mental illness. I didn't really know very many people that had a mental illness. So it was, and at the time, it was kind of taboo. You heard about people going into the nut house or whatever, but I didn't really know that much about mental illness at the time. And for me to be diagnosed with a mental illness, it was really a shock to myself. It was a shock to my family, and pretty difficult to deal with.
Anything you want to add, Pastor Moss, about something?
Refer. I do want to. Well, I tell you what,
quick. And you hear us keep saying refer, refer, refer. Because we are not the experts. We do not know process. And I think if I had to say a myth, I would have to refer back to the church. That's my field. Uh, Again, with somewhat like what Terry said, we do, and we do not want to deal with it. There are pastors who are dealing with mental health issues right now. COVID posed some serious problems: depression, oppression, thoughts of suicide. But many leaders are living under a myth that I can't tell nobody instead of getting some help. And if you do not get help and keep everything hidden, then all you're doing is masking, and you're hurting other people as well. So acknowledge that mental health is not taboo. It's just like if you're going to call and tell me I got high blood pressure, it need to be treated. If you got the flu or if you had COVID, it's
I do want to say this, and I do have some family members sitting in the audience. I do want to say this. I do have, if you are suffering with a mental illness, or if you do, um, well, I can't speak for anybody else but myself, so I'm going to speak for myself. Um, I just want to thank my family members, and my dad is sitting in the audience. Um, Without a good support system like I had, um, I don't know how I would have made it. My dad came through and was a very strong support system for me. And I think without my dad at one point, um, I don't know how I would have made it through. But he stepped in at one point and was my help. He was my help. He was my strong. He was my strength at one point. And I just want to thank you, Dad, because you and I got through a tough time. And I know you seeing me up here now makes you happy, because at this point, I just want to share with the audience, I'm truly happy. And at one point, I couldn't say that. I could not say that. For years and years, I was clinically depressed. Clinically depressed. Couldn't just could not honestly say that I felt good. And for us to have so much going on right now in the world, people committing suicide, young people, and even people my age committing suicide. I know there was one point where I was there, and I felt like that. I felt so depressed that I wanted to end my life. And my dad and my husband and people like that gave me the strength to want to keep going on. So it's real. Mental illness is real, and it's a real problem, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to get more attention. And that's one of the main reasons why I wrote this book, because I know there are people out there who are hurting, who are at their wits' end. And I know they need to know that there are people like me who have made it, who have gone beyond the point where, okay, I know the Lord is going to get me through this. I know that there is something worth it beyond this day. I know that even though it's bad right now, I know that it's worth going on. It's going to be a better day. So that's why I blog. That's why I write these books. That's why I minister to people on my job. That's why I keep doing the best on my job. That's why I keep going. Because I know that if I can make it, then somebody else can make it.
we're going to, in part two, we'll have to do a part two, but we're going to, and maybe we will deal with also healing from the hard parts of your journey, right? Because I think that's a major piece too. You can always, yeah, that would be a great piece, I think, because we also need to, how to bounce back from those vulnerable parts of that journey that could, in fact, make us bitter along the way. But here we are now at this point, and I think it's a great time for us to open up to our audience and to be able to allow our audience to ask the questions because we have about 13 minutes left. And so we want to be true to time tonight and be respectful of your time. But in doing so, we want to hear from you all. So any questions that you may have thought about for our authors, anything, whether it's directed towards their initial or specific work, or even just whether it's dealing in the area or the arena that they deal with, this is your time to now ask your questions as you desire. And so we do allow people, do they need the mic when they ask the questions? All right, so we'll make sure that our audience has the mics.
Good evening. I'm late coming in, but I came in on the tail end of what you're saying, and I believe what you're saying is very real. I'm not sure if this information that you provided is geared toward a certain age group, but I work with children that are in 4th and 5th grade and are thinking about these things. Even a 3rd grader, my daughter is a teacher, and she teaches 3rd grade, and we had to refer this child because this child was talking about ending their life. So is your book geared toward a certain age group, or do you have any information that you can provide that I can take back to the school to extend to our children?
Actually, we have a young lady here from the National Association for the Mentally Ill. You can you can go to the table on your way out, and she has materials here tonight that may be able to help you. Yeah, she's nodding her head. Yes, she has materials.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All right, got Reverend Newman.
Yes, ma'am. I applaud you today for being able to come and sit down and talk with a bunch of us folks, black folks, about mental illness. And yes, as African Americans or black folks, whatever you want to call us, we don't normally like to talk about mental illness, especially within our families. I heard you talk about the stigma associated with mental illness. That is true. I heard you talk about being a black female, the chocolate-covered nut, as you say. That is true, which is a double whammy. But I would really like to know, through all of that and on your journey, even with the faith walk that you've been talking to us about, what was the defining moment that you actually literally sat down and accepted that you had a mental disorder?
The defining moment when I accepted that I had a mental disorder was actually when I was first diagnosed. When I was in that hospital, in Parkland Hospital, right here in Baton Rouge, I looked in the mirror at myself, and I took a long, hard look in that mirror, and I accepted it. I accepted that I was diagnosed with a mental disorder, and I was ready for this journey. I just accepted it. I was ready to take on whatever was gonna come to me. I accepted it. I was 17, and I knew it was gonna be tough, but I looked in that mirror and I looked at myself, and I was like, okay, Lord, we're gonna do this. I took a long, hard look in that mirror, and I said, okay, I'm gonna get through this. That was the defining moment. You're welcome.
Any other questions from our audience? All right, we got one here, and then we got one over here. Okay, all right.
It's been very good that I've been here this afternoon to be with my sister and to be with my daughter. It's amazing, and I see some similarities between the two of them. I've known them my entire life. I've known her my entire life, as well as my daughter. And I've noticed tendencies between the two of them that they share. They have a hunger for whatever they go after. My question, I've noticed change, and that's a buzzword in my ears nowadays, Terry and Mary Louise. Something has happened in this land that we call home. I've seen a pandemic come through and changed almost every aspect of life. I've seen people who were reluctant to give God his place are starting to do so now. The question revolves around your activities. My sister in writing, my daughter in writing. Your efforts. Have you noticed any change from your efforts? Anything that you can put a pin on and say, look, God called me. God is at work. And I see the work that he's doing through me. Have you noticed that at all?
And let me make sure that I'm understanding you correctly, Boo. You said through our works, right? Our writing, yes, and that's when you know that God has assigned you to do what you do. I have, as a result of this work, I've had pastors from across the country actually order the book and have workshops and seminars for their ministers. I've had pastors to call me and said, thank you for helping me to understand the call, because tradition had me one place. But then when you helped us to understand through your work, and I've heard many of them to tell me, I've taken this stand against women preachers for years and don't have a solid reason to do so. Only a blood tradition between the brethren. I've had, and so God is doing his perfect work. I've had people to call me, and I've actually gone to speak. I've had brothers to call me and tell me, thank you, because I did not know how to minister to women. Because understandably, all they have had to deal with were men. So men deal with men a certain way. You brought women to the table. You brought them in the room through your book. And a lot of times, because of the surrounding of the brothers and the commitment and what they've been taught down through the years, it's called tradition, because the calling is a God agenda. And when you understand it from a God agenda, several of these pastors and preachers have literally told me, thank you, that my book, if you open and read it, it's not an argument for the call of women. It's not me soliciting their opinion of whether you believe in women or not. That's not for me to deal with. It's a God agenda. And so I've helped people, I've helped sisters to accept their call. Some women were trying to do other things because they did not want to face the obstacles and the struggles that I've had to. So they decided they'll sing in the choir. And instead of singing a song, they preach it halfway through. Instead of acknowledging, God, you called me. I've freed up some women and released them. And yet my book operates from protocol. And let me make this very clear. If you notice early in our conversation, when I knew that I was called, I went straight to my pastor. You got to understand protocol. It's an order to everything you do. And so I've tried to thread that into my work as well. And to help sisters. Now, let me tell you this before our time run out. I don't want to put all this on men. There are a lot of women who don't believe in women preachers. But I suggest that they read the book.
And I have both of them here. This is The Madness Within. So this is the first book, um, published in 2006. And then this is Chocolate Covered Nut. Not only has writing this book been therapeutic for myself, but writing Chocolate Covered Nut has also been therapeutic for myself. So not only has writing these books changed my life, but though but persons who have read this book, these both books, it's changed their lives already. Um, I'm not trying to. Well, I'm trying to become a best-selling author, but and I'm gonna claim it because my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law already prayed for me, and she's a prayer warrior. I'll tell y'all. But if I can just touch other people's lives and change their minds about mental health, their attitudes towards mental health, that would really really bless my soul. But one young man who read Chocolate Covered Nut told me specifically that that book touched his life and caused him to see mental illness in a different way. And it caused him to even tell me about somebody in his family that's suffering with a mental illness. So if it can touch him and tell, encourage him to tell me about somebody, just think what other people will do. It'll encourage them to tell them about somebody else. And it'll in turn tell them to tell somebody about somebody else. But the more people get comfortable with talking about it, then that'll get more people to help others talk about it. And then maybe some of these young people will stop feeling like it's going to be the end of the world with issues that can be solved and not solved by ending your life. I just feel like there's a better way. There's a better way.
Amen. I commend both of you for resources, the information that the awareness that you brought to us. And I hope that we can take what you presented to us and snowball. And I hope that you will continue, as you both of you mentioned earlier, about your journey. Pastor Marcus was describing the one to Terry, yours as revealed. And I know we all on a journey, and this journey will not end until Jesus comes. I understand that. But I would like to present a question for both of you because you both spoke about faith. And with my experience in social services, having to deal with all kinds of situation personalities, and some things we have to be very discreet on how we present certain information, or even I've always allowed a door to open up, just enough for drip to come through, and that was enough for me to stick my foot in. So, but I do know a lot of people, agency. There are a lot of people that we may meet who are not saved or don't understand about faith. My question to you is, uh, I do know that the experience would we have would cause us to fall on our knees, if not stay on our knees. And sometime that journey down on our knees, there's another experience even before we get on our knees. So my question is, has there ever been a time that you may have wavered or you may have thought uh, that your faith, Lord, where are you? You know, what's happening? I need you now. it's no sign of you right now. And even just just trying to explain to someone who may not know the Lord. And I guess this is a two-part question, but would that be a difficult situation for you if you ever entered in a situation like that? But I'm curious as to whether or not there has ever been a time where um, you may have wavered in your faith. And I do know that we are human at times, and sometimes we have to shake ourselves and remind us, who's in control. So when that happens, what has been your solution? If that,
You ask about 5 questions.
I know, I know, I know that.
But they were good. They were good and so relevant. Um, I like Terry can answer this way. I do not waver in my faith, but I have a theological rationale for it, and it's underlined with Habakkuk's story. Sure, I've had times when